It is wrong to somehow suggest that an undocumented immigrant is a criminal. Being an undocumented immigrant is not a crime. I know what a crime looks like. An undocumented immigrant is not a criminal. 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 An undocumented immigrant is not a criminal, and we have to correct course in this conversation. We're not going to treat people who are undocumented across the border as criminals. That's correct. It is
that ad right there, man. Trump, man, his team is releasing the greatest ads ever. And if I'm being honest, Kamala Harris is giving the Trump campaign, the greatest ads ever by accident, simply just by speaking and just by her failed policies, you know, speaks for itself. But today it gets even worse. According to a new report from the deputy director of ICE, Joe Biden and border czar Kamala Harris allowed a shocking number of criminals into America, including 13,099 murderers, over 15,000 R words, and over nearly 500,000 convicted criminals. Treason, disqualifying, evil, as Charlie Kirk put it. Let's check this out.
Yeah, and Sandra, bear with me. We just got these numbers moments ago, but it's a jaw dropper to say the least. So to set the stage here, let me just explain what these numbers mean. ICE has something called a non-detained docket. Essentially what that is it means migrants who were encountered by DHS but are no longer in federal custody. So who's on this non-detained docket? It's illegal immigrants who were caught and released at the border, released with the court date years away. They're in immigration proceedings, combined with illegal immigrants who have already been ordered, deported from the country by a judge, but are still here roaming the country. So keep that in mind, this non-detained docket. According to a letter that the acting director of ICE just sent to Texas Congressman Tony Gonzalez, on ICE's non-detained docket, they're currently tracking 425,000 non-citizens who have been convicted of a crime. Of that number, over 13,000 non-citizens have convictions for homicide and are on the non-detained docket, meaning they're roaming the country right now. On top of that, there are another 15,811 non-citizens convicted of sexual assault who are roaming the country right now on ICE's non-detained docket. It doesn't stop there. Those are convictions. The ICE director also says there are currently just under 1,900 non-citizens on the non-detained docket who have pending homicide charges who are roaming the country, and another 4,250 non-citizens who have pending sexual assault charges who are roaming the country on the non-detained docket. So people's eyes might be glazing over right now with all the numbers we just threw at you. Just to put it in a nutshell right here, what we've learned from the acting ICE director via this letter to Congressman Tony Gonzalez is right now there are over 13,000 illegal aliens convicted of homicide who are roaming the United States right now. There are another 15,811 illegal aliens roaming the country right now who have been convicted of sexual assault. And there are even more who are facing charges for homicide and charges for sexual assault. So this just goes to show, guys, the non-detained docket has exploded under the Biden administration to over, I believe it's 7.3 million. They're anticipating it could hit 8 million by the end of the year. But looking at the numbers insane on this letter right here, there are currently over 600,000 non-citizens on ICE's non-detained docket who are either convicted, 600,000 non-citizens on this non-detained docket who are roaming the country right now. Of that, 425,000 have already been convicted of crimes. 222,000 are pending crimes. And again, the most serious crimes we just told you about, over 13,000 convicted of homicide, over 15,000 convicted of sexual assault. And honestly, that is not a surprise to hear given these horrible headlines we keep seeing popping up in multiple parts of the country almost every day now of a horrible sexual assault or a murder or another violent felony committed by an illegal alien who is often caught and released from custody. And the jaw dropper here too, guys, is all these numbers we just rattled off, they don't even account for the nearly 2 million gotaways who have crossed our border under the Biden administration. Those almost 2 million gotaways, they were never encountered by DHS. They snuck in. They were never caught by Border Patrol. They were never encountered by ICE. There's no record of them. So they have nothing to do with the numbers I just rattled off to you. These are just the numbers of people that ICE has already encountered, that Border Patrol has encountered, that DHS knows who they are. And we just saw those horrible stories in Nantucket the other day. ICE ran a week-long operation in Nantucket, and in a single operation in a 48-hour span, they arrested 2 Salvadoran illegal aliens who came into the country as gotaways and were arrested for child rape on Nantucket. They got a Brazilian guy who was arrested for sexually assaulting a Nantucket resident, and then a Guatemalan guy who was previously deported who was arrested for sexually assaulting a Nantucket resident. So we keep seeing all these headlines about migrant crime popping up in different cities all over the country. This right here is the first time we have ever seen specific numbers as to who and what ICE is tracking when it comes to convicted criminals who have crossed the border at some point and are either supposed to be deported or are going through their immigration proceedings, but are not in ICE custody right now and are roaming the country. So I'll ping it back to you guys, but some pretty jaw-dropping numbers that we are still going through as we speak right now.
And just to think that nearly 500,000 number is going to be considered Kamala voters, right? They said she won't turn them away at any cost. How can you allow almost $16,000 foreign R-words in your country and then claim to be the champion for women and their rights? I mean, honestly, this is a direct contradiction. You're campaigning on something that you're not even advocating for in your current, term. The hypocrisy, man. But I love Major Retailer Green. Kamala Harris isn't just the border czar. She's the czar of chaos. Under her watch, criminals, R-words, and terrorists flood our communities. Let's not forget, she bailed on the BLM rioters who caused billions in damage, and she's tearing this country apart.
Since being appointed by border czar by President Joe Biden, Kamala Harris has undoubtedly been a complete failure in her job and has destroyed our country by releasing a record-setting levels of criminals, rapists, and terrorists into our communities. Despite the attempts of the fake news media to whitewash her appointment as border czar, as Axios correctly reported, and they're now lying and say they never did, she was in fact labeled a border czar by nearly every major news outlet across the country. Border czar Kamala Harris said, "Do not come," yet proudly welcomed 11.5 million illegals from over 160 countries, including over 2 million known gotaways who completely evaded U.S. authorities. She stood by and allowed these people to come in and idly watched our children and women being raped by illegal alien criminals. She's not just allowing them to come. The policies of the administration allow the CBP One app to import over 400,000 illegals into American communities. Under her watch as border czar, this has happened. She can fake it for the photo ops, but we know that Kamala Harris wholeheartedly supports the chaos at our border, the chaos in our streets, and the chaos in the families who have been victims of her open border policies. Border czar Harris outlandishly compared ICE to KKK and radically called for the ICE to be abolished. She also posted the Minnesota Freedom Fund to bail out violent Black Lives Matter terrorists who burned down cities, looted stores, destroyed communities, and caused over $2 billion in damage to American communities all over America. Kamala Harris is not only the border czar, she is also the czar of chaos. And her policies have destroyed America.
Now, before we continue, I got to do a few fact checks real quick. Everything that she said was true. Yeah. I just don't understand how people are pleased with the results of their current living situation. Because I believe that I can be unburdened by what has been. We're going to turn the page on her.